All right, so we're a little late to the party on this one, but you know what they say.
Well, better late than never.
Welcome to discussion on the film Final Destination, Bloodlines. Engage.
Engage!
The first thing I want to say about this movie is I appreciate the respect paid to the great Tony Todd. I'm going to start off with that because Tony Todd has been a fixture in these movies for some time. If you've seen any of the Final Destination movies prior to this one, you'd know that. And if you haven't, then here is your introduction. Tony Todd is a legend in the horror space. He has provided a voice and presence to characters that are memorable. And the same is true here. I'll say that something about it, there's something oddly lyrical about Tony Todd's appearance in this film, given that he was very sick. And there's something, I can't quite pinpoint it. I've been trying to think about what hits me about it. And I think it has to do with the fact that this movie deals with an unseen villain, death. And that all these characters are having to negotiate that and come up against that and face that in whatever form that takes. And here you have Tony Todd, the man, facing his own mortality. And how Adam Stein and Zach Lipovsky directed this project that essentially wrote in Tony Todd's death, or they wrote in his mortality. They wrote in his illness and made it something that is essentially functional in the narrative about people dying. This movie and the series at large is about like the final destination. This is the last trip, as it were, that we all make. We have a final resting place that we go to at the end of all this. And the fact that the movie respects not only just Tony Todd and his presence in the series of Final Destination movies, but Tony Todd as a man and him facing his mortality. There's something about it that's poetic. And if I'm being honest, just as an aside, the separate thing about it, something about it bothered me in a way. I can appreciate Tony Todd's inclusion and how this movie that deals with death as a villain, and how it's coming for these characters, including Tony Todd's character, and how in real life it's more actively, more presently in the mix for Tony Todd, given how late it was in the game and how this is his last appearance. Not only in any movie, but in this is his final movie in a movie called Final Destination. And something about it just, it hits. But my slight issue with it is that, obviously, I guess he was well enough to perform, to act in this movie, but something about it felt almost like I would have felt more comfortable if he was on a screen somewhere. Like if characters came to a room and they spoke to him via some screen or something. I don't know. I haven't quite figured out my feelings on that yet, but just something about it was like to respect the condition he was in, and that almost like I felt like he probably shouldn't have been on screen, but the fact that he was, and that it was handled with such care, I think is special. And I think honestly, this is probably one of the reasons I don't know if anyone's spoken to this, but I think that this might be one of the reasons why this movie was so strongly regarded. That's a small piece but it's a big piece. Tony Todd wasn't in the movie for very long, but you remember his presence. And I think because if you're a fan of these movies and you've seen them prior to this, you just know his connection to these movies. You know, it's like this. It's like a old blanket, you know, that you still have from childhood. It's that kind of comfort, oddly, in a movie series like this. That you have this kind of legacy character, this legacy fixture being featured in this movie. And a lot of it, it makes sense. You know, he should have been in this movie, but there's, I think the fact that he's here and there was such care there that I feel like audiences might have responded to that. That's just my thinking. Maybe not. The other thing about this movie that I think is probably so strong that I think it's the strongest thing that you even stronger than what you might see in the other movies of the series is the family component. The idea that the main characters we're following are a part of a family and an extended family, and that's major. And not just that, is that it's treated with a certain degree of seriousness and meaning. And I think the other thing, the other layer to that, dealing with family, is the idea or the aspect of family trauma and how that's passed down through generations. And you see examples of that in the film in different ways. And it's so interesting how a film franchise like this can get to a point where you can examine like deeper things. Now, they don't go super deep, and I don't think this is a movie that is meant for that. But it's always surprising pleasantly when you have a horror film that touches on those things. For instance, like I find that you see this in earlier films in a series where the first maybe one or two movies in like a long running horror series might have been dealing with something that's more deeper than just like, people come to these movies for the kills and just to see the creativity on screen, for the practical effects, how much blood you're going to see, like, and the humor element of it. These movies are not without humor. Those are part of the draw in these movies. But if you can come away from an experience like this with something a little bit deeper, like for instance, if you think about the Friday the 13th, for instance, the first movie, that's a really at the heart of that movie. Yes, it's a slasher, right? Which is the subgenre, the horror subgenre piece, but it's a slasher. But the heart of that movie is really about a mother's grief over her son, and she's her anger. She felt like her son wasn't being properly looked after, and so she took matters in her own hands. And that's what you get, which is a deeper thing than what you get in the later movies in the series, where it becomes more about the kills that becomes the highlight. Where I always find it fascinating where you have a horror movie that smuggles in something more rich. You look at a film like Talk to Me, the recent film Talk to Me. It's a supernatural horror movie, but that's really about grief. Hereditary, for instance, is it's also about family trauma, family stuff. There's deeper stuff going on than just the spookiness and the thriller element of it. And I think some of those films can go deeper than others. But I think along those lines, Bloodlines is, again, not deep, but because it touches on family trauma and it touches on like family as a theme and the interconnectedness of that, and sometimes and what that looks like when you have maybe half siblings or step siblings and how that plays into the situation. Those are the deeper things that you don't expect in a movie like this, that I think is part of the draw of why this movie was so well received. It also has good, I think the movie has sound character threads Meaning, I think the closest family members in this movie, I dug those relationships and how they played out, how they were written, and how they were acted. If you're new to the Final Destination films, these are essentially deaths that are freak accidents, but they're personified. Like the actions are personified, even though we don't see a figure. Things happen in a way that it's you believe that there is an unseen force doing stuff to orchestrate the deaths of the characters. And that's all you really need to know. The only difference with this movie is that the victims, the main characters we're following, are all family. And this family is the target of death. Because if you've seen the trailers and things, you know this already. But the reason for that is because years earlier, before the story of this film takes place, one of our characters prevents the deaths of a lot of people who ended up going on to have children. And because of that, death now has to take out everyone who's descended from those people who have survived the initial threat to their lives. So it's a unique way in. And the mystery element of it, which is what you get in all of these films, is also unique. You have this book that is passed down, ended up from one of the main characters' grandmothers, who was the woman who saved everyone decades earlier, which is kind of cool. This book is like, it references, if you're eagle-eyed enough during the viewing to catch certain images in this book, you'll catch like Easter eggs from previous Final Destination movies. Now, this film isn't explicit about them being connected to this movie, but it's kind of cool if you've seen those movies to just catch those Easter eggs in it, and how that book is essentially used to figure out the mystery of how death is working. You then get to watch the characters try to outsmart death, and a whole bunch of kills and hijinks and different random scenarios ensues. One of the things I majorly appreciated about this movie was how it's a masterclass in Chekhov's gun. If you don't know what Chekhov's gun is, it's essentially the execution of like setups and payoffs. So if you see a scene in a movie or you read a scene in a book and a gun is mentioned, or you see a gun in a shot, that gun has to be used in the next scene or two scenes later. You have to pay that off at some point. You don't just show a random gun in the scene for no reason. There's a purpose for that. And this movie is essentially all about setups and payoffs, specifically when it comes to the deaths, because you don't have a movie. You don't have a Final Destination movie if you don't do that. And it's amazing how you can walk into a room, you have characters walk into a room and have cutaways to different items in that room. And your mind, it's interesting because it feels interactive. It's like the audience gets to play along with figuring out how this character is going to die, because you see a pen over here and you see a glass over there. You see a knife on the wall, a vacuum cleaner over here that's plugged in, that's not on. And all these things can somehow randomly can lead to a death. You can imagine, if you slip on somebody spilled some water, you slipped on the water, your head can hit that glass over there, and the glass breaks. The glass slices you, and somehow a shard of that glass goes towards where the vacuum cleaner is that's plugged up over there and turns on, and then somehow it turns on and comes for you, and then it cuts something off of you. Like something the most random things can happen if you just look at and somehow the movie does a good job of also playing with your expectations about what could happen, and you just see one thing and go, I know the character's going to die by a pin to the eye. And it plays with you because it sets things up in the way that you think that's going to happen, and maybe you don't get that. You might get something else. It plays with you, but it never shows you what you expect. And I really dug that about this movie. And then given that, it's also immensely stress inducing. It's like being in a room with a bunch of babies and seeing them crawl around the room and looking at all the ways they could get hurt, and you as the adult trying to move away things that you know they could get wrapped up in and get hurt by. It's the most stressful thing. And it's thrilling in that way. So and this is before no deaths even happened yet. And I think every Final Destination movie has something like this, where you can, it's a 50-50 engagement. So the audience comes to these movies and brings their own expectations about what's going on. You know someone's going to die. You go in knowing that's happening. So it's not like a spoiler for you. You know it's going to happen, but you don't know how. The audience comes in with their expectations about how this happens, and the movie does the rest of the work in tricking you, showing you other things, the way you think somebody might get jacked up or not, or whatever it is. And it's quite thrilling in that way. And so, plot and stuff aside, it's a good case study for just learning about how to set things up and pay things off properly. And then, of course, there are the kills. There are several creative kills on screen. And I think, again, this is why people come to these movies. They come specifically to see how people are going to die. And sometimes it's the deaths are mixed in with some fun. It's and just if you can separate yourself from what's on the screen for a minute in the moment, there's actually really good practical effects on display. There's great visual effects as well, but the practical effects are very strong, and the stuff looks quite convincing. It's probably some of the best looking gruesome death media in these movies, probably in a while. This movie doesn't reinvent the formula. It just gives you new ingredients. And I think if you are open, you could have some fun with this movie. Just be aware that when you leave, you will also be more aware, as is the case with a lot of other previous Final Destination movies. When you come out of the movie, just looking around your surroundings, I'm sorry to say that you will be just a little bit more aware of your surroundings and be a little bit more careful about where you walk, how you walk, how you cross the street, how you get into your car, things like that. So just be aware that, after such a lengthy hiatus with the Final Destination movies, people's new anxieties will return to, or probably already have returned to audiences who have seen the movie. This is what happened to me, and it might happen to you. So if you're considering checking out Final Destination and you haven't seen it already, give Bloodlines a shot. It is thrilling. It's fun. It's not too long. It'll get you in and out pretty soon, and you'll have had a fun experience. It's like going into a haunted house just for the thrill. Coming out a little bit more open-eyed than you were when you went in. So that's going to be it for this review. If you've stuck around to the end, thank you for taking the time to hang out and listen to the rant on this movie. Let me know what you think. If you've seen it, I'm eager to hear about it. All right, that's going to do it for me. I'm getting out of here. Take it easy, and I'll see you in the next one.